Why the long face?
Antifa.
Yes, I know I'm a bit late to the party, but I hadn't originally been planning to watch this show, damn it. I was blissfully unaware of the horrors going on in season 4, but then I kept seeing things about it online, and there was one thing in particular that I saw that pissed me off so much it inspired this video. So I revisited the first 3 seasons and then finally got around to finishing the show like a month after season 4 went off. And I should be clear in saying that I do actually like a lot of things about this show, even season 4. Season 1 is actually pretty good and has a lot of great characters who go on well-written arcs. It's not the best thing in the world, and most of the things it does I've seen done better elsewhere, but that's not to say it isn't good. But season 2 is a massive step down in quality. For starters, it was the season that really started to lean into the overly gratuitous nature of, let's be disgusting and gory just for the sake of one-upping ourselves and seeing how much the audience can bear to watch before they give up. Now, the revolting and violent aspect of the show was always here from the very beginning, and for a lot of people that was part of the appeal. The show promised to take traditional tropes in superhero media and flip them on their heads by satirizing massive IPs like the MCU, daring to do a concept like evil Superman, which at the time was still somewhat fresh and new, and by actually showing the more violent consequences of hero work. The death of Huey's girlfriend Robin is set right at the start of the show, and it immediately signifies exactly what you're gonna get. It's messy, bloody, and frankly horrific. This isn't like The Flash, where Barry saves the day and all his fight scenes are tame and generally not very brutal. When A-Train shows up, you know it's serious, because you've just seen how easily he can violently kill you before you even have a chance to blink. And he's of course a somewhat major antagonist in the first season because he just killed the main character's girlfriend. This scene also works to further emphasize the trauma Huey experienced when Robin died that'll ultimately lead to him making the choice to follow Butcher on his misguided path for revenge. What I'm getting at here is that in season 1, yeah, there was a lot of carnage, but there was always a point to it. It was there to further accentuate the current situation and to enhance plot points and themes. Huey making the choice to kill Translucent firmly solidifies him as in the game now, and that's represented by all the blood splattered on his face and clothes. He's made the choice to not keep himself clean. But season 2 was the first one that really started pushing it, and by season 3, any notion of that aspect being secondary rather than the main point is just completely gone. Like, when I see Ant-Man shrink down and go into someone's dick hole, sneeze, and accidentally expand and kill him, I start to wonder what we're doing. What purpose did this serve that couldn't have been accomplished all the same without all the needless gratuity? And listen, I'm no pearl clutcher. I'm not even necessarily saying the show is bad for having mindless gore for the sake of it, but it's one of the many factors that turn me off of it. The show is bad because, well, there's a lot of writing issues, as per usual. The plot is oftentimes lacking, if not outright nonsensical. A lot of the characters either act really stupidly for no reason, or they're damaged in other ways, and the show seems to have lost sight of what it was originally about thematically in order to shove in more disgusting, gratuitous violence. It tries to be a satire of superhero media, but a lot of the time, it doesn't even seem to understand the superhero it's parodying. Homelander is the obvious example, since he's meant to be what if Superman was a megalomaniacal narcissist, but the issues with his character are more to do with just how stupid they randomly made him. Just in case you don't remember season 1 all that well, Homelander was a lot of things. He was emotionally immature, thanks in large part to the fact that he was raised in a lab and experimented on throughout his childhood. He didn't have anyone to actually teach him right from wrong, and he became obsessed with his own perception. He has this deep-seated need to be loved, and it causes him to do increasingly awful things to earn the approval of others. But never in season 1 would I have described Homelander as stupid. He's easy to manipulate at first, sure, but he's also pretty good at figuring out that he's being manipulated fairly quickly and dealing with the person in question. A big thing about season 1 is that the main characters are operating with a sense of anonymity. None of them are known by the Seven, because even the ones who should be recognized by the people that directly wrong them get overlooked as just another fan anytime they interact with one of the Supes. Huey bumps into A-Train outside of his girlfriend's apartment, and despite the guy having recently smashed through his girlfriend and having to look him directly in the eye to apologize, he still doesn't recognize him. The same is the case for Homelander the one time he sees Butcher before realizing who he is, and that's despite the fact that he's met this guy before and quite literally raped his wife. The Supes tend to overlook these guys in season 1, and the boys use that to their advantage to operate in plain sight right under their noses. But that's no longer the case in season 2. Homelander knows who all these guys are and can identify their faces, if not their names, because, again, he's a smart character who was able to figure out pretty quickly who killed Translucent and why. He figures out who Butcher is and why he wants to kill him without having to be told. And so when he confronts him at Stillwell's, he doesn't let him take the easy way out and blow himself up. He rescues him from the explosion and takes him to Becca's, revealing that she's still alive and that now she has a son. The product of the worst thing to ever happen to these people, a daily reminder of how Homelander messed up all their lives, and Homelander made sure Butcher knew about that before letting him die. That was at the end of the first season, and starting off season 2, you might be wondering why Butcher is still alive. At first I thought maybe Homelander would rather Butcher live with this knowledge and let it haunt him for the rest of his days, but even if that's the case, you'd think he would at least keep him locked up somewhere, or take some sort of measure to keep track of him. Butcher's just walking around a free man, and because of this, he's able to go back to the boys and continue making trouble for Vought. And, well, the reason we're given by the show for why he decided to do this is because he apparently made a deal with Becca.
Becca, we had a deal. A deal that is alive and well and running around as free as a goddamn bird.
The details of which we later learn are that she said she would kill herself in front of Ryan if any harm should come to Butcher, and that she would tell him it was Homelander's fault.
I said if he hurt you, I would kill myself in front of Ryan. And my last words would be, your father did this to me.
It's a good thing he don't know your tales.
I wasn't bluffing.
She insists to Butcher that she wasn't bluffing about that, which I find strange. Doesn't really seem in character for her to traumatize her own son like that, even if it's to save the man she loves. But either way, that was their deal. Only, the thing is, Becca is completely powerless in the situation. She and Ryan live in this walled-off compound built by Vought to simulate a normal suburban neighborhood for Ryan to grow up in, hoping to give him a nice, somewhat ordinary upbringing so that he won't turn out like Homelander, and neither of them are allowed to leave this place. So, if Homelander took Butcher out of there, he could do whatever he wanted to him, and Becca would have no way of ever ensuring he held up his end of the deal. Maybe she could if he held him prisoner and had him take pictures with the daily newspaper or something, but you can't really do that if you have no idea where he fucking is. Either way, Butcher is the only one with plot armor here, so any of the other characters are still fair game, and Homelander is more than happy to kill them. He even goads Starlight into killing Huey, and this only doesn't happen because of this. He lets Starlight live after this point because she manages to convince him that she's not working with Huey, and she's still pissed off at him for lying to her, and Homelander never thinks to use the tracking chip that she still has in her neck to follow her and maybe find out if she is, in fact, still working with the boys. Spoiler alert, she is. Later on in the season, she gets captured by Vought, and this is after she's removed her chip and gone rogue, and Homelander still decides not to kill her. They're holding her in this prison that's apparently in Vought Tower and not in some off-the-books black site somewhere. And to be fair to Homelander, he does want to kill her, but at this point he's working with Stormfront, who wants to keep her alive because it's better publicity.
Starlight is a traitor is trending #1, and we've got 1 million tweets in support of Compound V. A common enemy rallies the base.
I don't know why you can't just kill her and still tout her as a public villain, but alright. Then in the finale, the gloves are off because Becca's dead, and Butcher can't really hide behind the deal she made with Homelander anymore. But just as he's about to kill him, Maeve shows up out of nowhere and threatens to release video footage she recovered of the time he abandoned an entire plane of people to die. And since we've already gone over how he's super image obsessed, he's not willing to let that footage get out. I would ask why he doesn't simply kill all of them and destroy the phone, but I guess Homelander is assuming she'd be smart enough to have copies of that footage hidden elsewhere with people ready to upload it should anything happen to her, though it's not clear if that actually is the case. It's not a very good bit of blackmail anyway, since Homelander kinda has the ultimate trump card, which is, if you do anything to defame me, then I'll have nothing left to lose and I will destroy everything on this planet, which it takes him like a year to realize apparently. But once he does, you'd think he might, actually kill the people who are actively undermining his efforts and looking for ways to kill him. Now, I've heard a few people say that the reason Homelander and the other supes don't take the multiple opportunities they have to kill the boys is simply that they're overconfident. I mean, like I already said earlier, they tend to overlook normal people that they deem to be of lesser importance, but that's just it. They don't deem these guys unimportant. When Homelander finds out Translucent is missing, he raises hell trying to find him, because if someone can so easily fuck with one of their own, that's a problem. It makes them look weak. When the gory remains of Translucent are then shipped to Homelander in a box with a message warning, "Coming for you," he takes it seriously and quickly figures out who these people are and what they want. The same can be said about all the supes in this show. They will pay attention if they consider you a threat, and the boys have proven themselves to be one. There's this plot point in season 2 where Black Noir randomly decides to start actually trying to find Butcher, and he does so pretty easily. Like, kinda stupidly easily. He basically just has one of the tech people search for him, and they find him on one of the cameras set up to detect if anyone's coming in and out of the compound Becca's at. I don't know what fucking good those cameras are if nobody's checking them, and the only way anyone will actually see someone sneaking in is if they're actively searching for it. But either way, the show then implies that Noir somehow tracked Butcher from Becca's.
Black Noir's here.
Wasn't us. We were cautious. We swapped cars, no toll roads.
He must have tracked me from Becca's.
Apparently, it wasn't that hard to find Butcher, and when he does, he's pretty damn set on killing him, Huey, and MM, so if Homelander wanted to, he could have easily done the same. By the time of Season 4, I've kind of lost count of all the reasons Homelander can and can't kill these guys, honestly. He's no longer threatened by the plain footage because the heroes understand what'll happen if that ever gets out, and in fact, he literally threatens to brutally murder Huey if Starlight doesn't stay in line, so he's clearly willing to do that.
Because if you step 1 inch out of line, I mean, if you so much as fucking blink the wrong way, then that will be Huey.
I guess the only reason he's even bothering with this is because Starlight playing pretend as his girlfriend is good for his poll numbers, but the second she leaves the 7 and starts publicly speaking out against Homelander, you'd think that goes right out the window. And in the season finale, he has literally all of them in his sights and could easily kill them, but he doesn't because... I don't know, I guess he doesn't want to look mean and scary in front of Ryan. Actually, can we talk about Ryan? Because whether or not Homelander brutally murdering someone right in front of him would negatively affect him in any way is up for debate at this point. At the end of the same episode, he watches as Homelander lasers a man to death in the middle of a crowd simply for throwing something at Ryan. And then all the crowd cheers and Ryan fucking smiles. I found this moment incredibly weird because up to this point, everything we'd seen about Ryan indicated that he was, you know, a good person. Like, sure, he had a bit of an antisocial upbringing, so he's not the most well-adjusted person in the world, but his mom always tried to instill moral values within him that he really seemed to take to heart.
Sometimes it helps to imagine someone you hate.
But at home, when I say hate, I have to put a quarter in a swear jar. But I don't really hate anyone.
The first time Ryan ever does anything even remotely dark is when he kills Stormfront and subsequently Becca by mistake. But even that was only in service to trying to protect his mom, and he immediately felt really bad about it afterward. Nothing about Ryan suggests that there's any part of him who enjoys the suffering of others, but in the beginning of Season 4, he seems to have bought into Homelander's whole humans are just toys for our amusement philosophy, which is really weird. But then, the second Ryan accidentally kills someone he likes, it's back to, oh my god, I can't believe I killed someone. I don't want to do this anymore, Dad. And I'm like, can we stop flip-flopping with this kid every 5 seconds? It always seemed like we were setting Ryan up as the one who will eventually kill Homelander, but at this point, I have no idea what they're gonna do with him, and I do not mean that in a good way. Sometimes Ryan really cares about people and doesn't want anything to do with Homelander, and sometimes he doesn't really give a shit and actually seems to enjoy the fact that his father brutally murdered a guy for the slightest possible offense. So I really just don't know. It seems to be whatever the writers currently want the conflict to be for Butcher and Homelander, Ryan will just toss a coin and pick a side. But because of this, it really makes it hard to figure out what they're going for with Butcher's characterization. Like, initially his whole thing was that he was on this self-destructive downward spiral where he wants to kill Homelander and get his revenge, and it doesn't really matter what happens to him. The only person he ever truly cared about is gone, and he's determined to spend the rest of his life chasing the guy who killed her. And then he finds out Becca's alive, but she doesn't want to leave with him because she knows he would never accept Ryan, and this makes him basically suicidal, because everything he's done for the better part of a decade has basically been for nothing now. He eventually finds a new purpose when Becca dies and makes him promise to look after Ryan and make sure he doesn't turn out like Homelander, and so the two bond in their mutual grief over Becca and form something of a father-son relationship. This all seems to be setting up that Butcher's ultimately gonna have to make a choice between getting revenge against Homelander or saving Ryan, and probably dying in the process depending on how they want to go with this. But they have a falling out in Season 3, and then Homelander finds him, so by the end of that season he's back with Homelander, and as we just established, revels in watching a man die for being somewhat mean to him. And I don't know what I'm meant to make of Ryan's character, so I have no idea how to interpret Butcher's perception of him. He wants to save Ryan from Homelander, and throughout Season 4, he debates with himself about whether or not it'd ultimately be better for the world at large if Ryan were to die right along with his father. By the end, it seems like he's realized Ryan has to go, and this is treated like a bad thing, but considering this kid just killed the woman who looked after him for a whole year following the death of his mother and doesn't even seem fazed by it, I think Butcher's right to come to that conclusion. You might be saying the arc they're setting up for season 5 will involve Ryan coming to his senses through Butcher appealing to his humanity and maybe sacrificing himself or something in the process. And you're probably right, but what I'm getting at is that I won't be able to buy that redemption because we've been shown time and time again that Ryan will completely flip his morals at the slightest inconvenience. So the show ending with him being Homelander but good this time isn't going to land as well as I think the show wants it to. There are other reasons I find Homelander frustrating, but the main one is that the show doesn't seem to know what to do with his character. Every season it's the exact same thing, and after the 4th or 5th scene of him talking to himself in a mirror or drinking breast milk, which has become a meme now more than an actual destructive trait that signifies his insanity, I just start to lose interest. Yes, Homelander is insecure and narcissistic and ultimately wants to be loved by the masses, but will settle for being feared if push comes to shove. I get it. Now can you please actually have him do something? Can we change the status quo even a little bit so that it's not just Homelander is being manipulated by some new supervillain character while securing more power over Vought and the people who work there, and boy, you just know everyone else is sick of his shit, but not a single one of them is gonna do anything about it because he's just so scary. By the way, something that's worth touching upon, just how powerful is Homelander exactly? Because you might hear evil version of Superman and assume their power levels are similar, if not exact. For all intents and purposes, he's this world stand-in for a Superman figure and seems to have more or less the same power set. He can fly, shoot lasers out of his eyes, he has super strength, hearing, and smell, he can see through anything except zinc.
What can't I see through?
Zinc, Homelander.
Correct.
While Superman can see through anything except lead. They're very similar is my point, but Homelander's powers also seem to be toned down significantly in pretty much every way. I mean, the season 3 finale kind of proves this by having him engage in a 1v1 with Maeve, and it's actually close. Maeve is nothing to scoff at herself in terms of strength, durability, and overall power, but she shouldn't be able to stab someone as strong as Superman in the ear and actually cause him to bleed, let alone make him bleed just by punching him repeatedly. So that implies he's much weaker than Superman, even if still the most powerful soup in the boys universe. It also doesn't help that they don't always apply his abilities consistently. Sometimes his super hearing allows him to hear Mallory tapping on her phone screen from several feet away, or even an entire conversation taking place miles away from where he is.
Just keep him calm. Our best guess, he'll get bored and move on.
You don't know that.
You were right. I'm not gonna get bored and move on.
And other times, Huey can be hiding right above him in a vent without Homelander being able to hear his breathing. And actually, unless this vent is also coated in zinc, he should be able to see Huey, so I don't know how the fuck he's getting away. Makes it hard to accurately determine just how powerful he's supposed to be, but the ultimate point is, I don't really believe the notion that he could destroy the entire world if he decided to. Frankly, I think a couple of well-trained missiles from the US government would be enough to kill him, or at least significantly cripple him a la Stormfront. And if he's not powerful enough to utterly decimate the planet if he becomes angry enough, then his threatening persona that so much of the show's stakes are built on kinda loses its effect. There's a point in season 3 where Annie and Maeve are trying to get a few soups together to team up against him, and based on the way Maeve fought him in the finale, I'm pretty sure they would have won that contest easily. This is also why it's kinda hard to buy that he was able to stage a coup at the end of season 4 and effectively make himself king of the world. I guess the military doesn't have anything to say about the active treason taking place by the Speaker of the House deputizing the soups and placing the nation under martial law. Otherwise, again, they could take him out very easily. But if you think Homelander gets it bad, let me tell you about the rest of the 7. Most of them aren't really given much to do, but they do make sure to devote plenty of time to the deep for some reason. Like, for the life of me, I cannot figure out why this guy takes up so much screen time. He's not funny, and yet basically every scene of his is just this overly drawn out comedy scene where he does something silly like sing with his gills.
Everything I hope for.
Or fuck an octopus. It's weird because even when there is something meaningful to explore with him, they still turn him into a joke. Any moment of characterization is played for laughs and ultimately undercut, and he never grows from it. And it'd be one thing if these scenes were funny, but they never are. They have this plotline throughout season 2 where basically Deep is trying to redeem himself in the eyes of Vought so he can get back into the 7. And in this time of great vulnerability, he's preyed upon by a powerful and influential cult. They set him up with a wife and have him go around recruiting other soups into this cult. And you'd think they might be setting up some really scary concept where these extremely powerful beings are beholden to the will of a prominent religious faction that seeks to dominate the culture. But Deep gets mad when they don't get him back into the Seven, then he gets kicked out from the cult, and the only time we ever see anything to do with this plotline ever again is when Deep is going on this campaign about how toxic they are. And it's played for a fucking joke. Again! It's used for a shallow vanity campaign that doesn't explore his character or develop him in any way, nor does it touch upon the world-building potential of such a powerful organization. And if you think that's bad, wait until I tell you about the time he was sexually assaulted. In the first episode of the show, he whips down his pants in front of Starlight and tells her that if she doesn't give him a blowjob, he's gonna pull rank and make sure she gets kicked out of the Seven. This is rightfully treated as a disgusting, horrifying thing that causes her to question every single belief she's upheld about what it means to be a superhero and a member of the most famous group of them. She ultimately sucks it up and does it, but eventually when she's had enough, she outs him for what he did, and the bad press causes Vought to fire him from the Seven and banish him to Ohio, aka the 10th Circle of Hades. This is the first time Deep's character is ever really explored in any capacity, and we find out that he has gills and is super insecure about them. One day he brings home a girl who asks to see the gills, and he's really not comfortable with it, but eventually takes off his shirt, and she starts aggressively fingering them while throwing him down onto the couch. He tells her he wants her to stop, and she calls him a freak and continues. I don't really know how she managed to keep him pinned down, considering she's just a normal human and he has, super strength, but I'm not here to victim blame. The point is, he got raped, and to the show's credit, this is not depicted as anything other than traumatizing and horrific, which is more than can be said about a certain episode in season 4. What I take issue with is how the rest of this is dealt with by the show. Like I kind of touched on in passing already, the insecurity he has for his gills is eventually handled when the cult people get him high on shrooms and don't let him leave his room until he hashes things out with them. The gills now being able to speak to him and the voice of Patton Oswalt thanks to the fact that, again, he's high as a kite. None of the scenes with them actually take the time to explore his inner psyche, nor do they even acknowledge the fact that this deformity of which he's so ashamed was recently the subject of a severely traumatic experience. Instead, they talk about finger-banging a kindergarten teacher behind the bleachers, and then they sing "You Are So Beautiful" until he comes to accept them as part of his body.
Everything I need.
There is one thing these scenes touch on in passing that might have actually been used to facilitate an arc for him going forward, which is that his insecurity about the gills is what causes him to treat women the way that he does. He's afraid they'd laugh at him if they saw them, so he makes sure to humiliate them before they ever get the chance. You could have used this in the fact that he literally experienced the same thing he did to Starlight as a means of character growth, where he becomes a better person who genuinely seeks redemption and forgiveness from the people he's wronged. But the show just drops this. He goes back to the Seven and immediately becomes Homelander's yes man again. He's still a womanizing piece of shit and he hasn't learned a damn thing. Deep has never been a good character, not even in season 1. And now we're 4 seasons in and not a single thing has changed. I don't think it would be that big a deal if he was a minor character who showed up every once in a while, but he's one of the main villains on this show. And like I said, they devote a lot of screen time to him that just isn't justified. I will say A-Train gets it much better because at least in seasons 2 and 3, he's not really badly written so much as they just don't seem to know what to do with his character. But they don't want to get rid of him because, again, he's the villain who killed Huey's girlfriend, so there needs to be some sort of resolution to that rivalry. But they wanted to wait to do that for later on in the show, I guess. So for these 2 seasons, he's just kind of there. He's having heart problems. That's basically it. In season 3, his brother Nate talks to him about how he could be doing more for the black community by speaking out against a racist soup named Blue Hawk. And when A-Train tries to do it the corporate way and not actually get his hands dirty, nothing gets accomplished, and Blue Hawk ends up crippling his brother for life. This causes A-Train to brutally murder him out of revenge, but obviously that isn't doing anything to address the core of the issue, so it doesn't make anything better, as Nate is quick to point out. This is something, I guess, but it really isn't much, and it kind of doesn't go anywhere after this. To be fair, this and season 4 do touch on his role as an African-American superhero, and what that means when Vought only wants to use his race to pander to a demographic rather than actually bother to represent them genuinely. They have A-Train being forced to do this white savior movie where Will Ferrell plays a coach who pulls him out of the ghetto and inspires him to become a hero. That and a multitude of other factors is what finally pushes A-Train into betraying Homelander and helping the boys take him down. Something that was pretty obviously always going to happen, but again, they wanted to wait a bit to keep that drama between him and Huey going while he sat on the fence for way longer than he probably should have. I think when it became clear in season 3 that he was gonna die inevitably once Homelander had had his fun with him, that should have been when he turned. And actually, I think it would have been way stronger as a character decision to do it when he was at his weakest and most vulnerable, rather than wait for season 4 when he had a brand new heart. But they didn't do that. Credit where it's due, though, the arc they send A-Train on in season 4 is pretty neat. There's this particularly nice scene where he has to rush MM to the hospital after he has a panic attack, and when he does, a kid sees him, smiles in awe, and he rushes off. It's the first time he's ever actually done something truly heroic without any other motivation than to help someone, and without all the lights and cameras focused on him, and it makes him feel really good to have done the right thing and inspired that young boy. As for his relationship with Huey, I also think that what they did here was very mature, and my only real complaint would be that they had these characters meander in limbo for 2 seasons before ultimately reaching this point. Enough time has passed and enough things have happened now that Huey is finally at a place where he can forgive A-Train for Robin after seeing that he's turned over a new leaf and is really trying to help. Their dynamic perfectly mirrors that of Butcher and Homelander, who seem forever locked in this rivalry that can only end one way.
Well, what if we share a different destiny? Scorched earth, shock and awe, blood and bone.
But where Butcher is ultimately going down a destructive path that'll get him killed and accomplish nothing, Huey is able to finally let go of his demons and grow as a person. It's similar to the arc he went on in season 1, but I don't think he can ever truly let go unless he's forgiven A-Train, and now he has. Also, I say again, I don't know exactly what they plan to do with Butcher, so it might be Butcher also breaks free of this cycle like Huey does, but like I said, I really just have no idea what they're going for on that front anymore. Black Noir was a big disappointment. I know in the comics they do some crazy storyline where it turns out Noir was actually a Homelander clone all along who was made as a contingency for if Homelander ever became too much to handle, and then he ended up actually being far more unhinged and was actually the one who raped Becca, and I'm not suggesting they should have adapted that faithfully. That's fucking stupid and it would never have worked. But I do really dig the idea that of all the other superheroes in the show, Noir is the only one who can physically stand against Homelander. He's sort of shrouded in mystery for the first couple of seasons, which only adds to the intrigue, because you have no idea how powerful he is. For all we know, he's the only one strong enough to meaningfully hurt Homelander, and one of the only ones durable enough to take the brunt of his attacks without immediately dying. We don't know exactly how strong he is, but we know he took Kimiko down in like 5 seconds flat, and we know that other than Homelander and the other major players like Soldier Boy and Stormfront, Noir is the only soup that the boys absolutely do not want to fuck with. Translucent is attacking Huey at work? No problem, I'll just hit the fucker with my car and 1v1 him with nothing but a crowbar. Black Noir has tracked me to my house and is waiting outside to kill us. Better call the fire department and falsely report a gas leak in the neighborhood just to buy ourselves a few hours to figure out what the fuck we're gonna do about it. There are also strong implications that at least some aspects of his comic book counterpart are true here too. It's hinted at and then directly confirmed by a spin-off show in an episode that is considered canon that Noir's entire purpose is to closely monitor Homelander to make sure he doesn't step out of line.
If Mr. Edgar believes Black Noir can teach me...
Noir is not there to teach you. He is there to watch you. Make sure you follow the script, make sure you don't screw up and embarrass the company, and bring you in. If you do.
He's the only one of the soups who answers directly to Edgar to the point where he wears a body cam and Edgar watches him every time he goes out and does anything. So you'd think if any of the soups on this show stands even a chance of beating Homelander, it'd be this guy, right? Nope. The thing I just mentioned about him being specifically loyal to Edgar makes it weird that he would just stand by while Homelander ousts Edgar as CEO of Vought and gets him sent to prison, so already with just that move, anything I thought I understood about his character just went out the window. We find out he used to be part of Soldier Boy's team back in the 80s, and that Soldier Boy violently abused him at several points. So when he finds out Soldier Boy is alive and out to kill all of his old team for selling him out to the Russians, he freaks out and goes into hiding. Makes sense, he's having a natural response to his trauma by not wanting to face Soldier Boy. I hope they give that some kind of resolution. They do this thing where, in order to show us his inner thoughts, we see what he always sees, a bunch of talking cartoon animals egging him on to face up against Soldier Boy. And it's abundantly clear from the side of this just how damaged his psyche really is. I actually like this a lot. But then, after they talk him into it, he goes back to the tower, and Homelander confronts him about the fact that Soldier Boy just revealed himself to be his father, making him no longer sure if he wants to kill him. He asks Noir if he knew, and apparently taking his silence as confirmation, even though Noir is literally always quiet, he kills him. That's it. He never faces Soldier Boy. There's no resolution to his trauma or any kind of arc. he's just dead. And to add insult to injury, the cartoon animals show back up and say this.
Soon you'll be in the sweet embrace of Christ the Lord.
Like, I guess this is supposed to be funny, because if it's supposed to be sad like you'd naturally expect, then I don't know what to make of that line. It seemed intentionally written and delivered that way for the sake of comedy, but that completely undermines not only the impact of his death, but also the sadness of the fact that these cutesy little animals only exist because of how deeply alone and scared Noir must always feel. They're a testament to how mentally broken he is, and they show up in his final moments of life to make a funny joke for the audience. I don't understand the show's obsession with all these characters being nothing but jokes. Speaking of which, this is what they decide to do with him in season 4. Since his whole persona was just the mysterious silent ninja in the first 3 seasons, Vought decides to just have an actor sit in on all the 7 meetings and just pretend to be him. For the first little bit, he just sits there silently like you'd expect, making it feel like nothing's really changed and that his presence is still felt. But then they decide to do the big reveal.
Yo, what the fuck? That was so fucked up, you guys.
The dead speak! His whole deal is that he's an actor trying to figure out the character, and all he does across the entire season is vent his frustration that Noir is so hard to act for because he was so enigmatic.
Look, I'm on an island here. Okay, I have questions, but I'm not allowed to speak. I hate Saki. But I'm supposed to follow some stupid black ninja bullshit, which makes no goddamn sense, by the way. You ever meet a black ninja? Like, Noir lives in a ninja dojo apartment. But best I can tell, he didn't know karate. I need some intentionality here. I'm just having trouble with Noir's motivation, you feel me? You didn't hire me to stand around like a fucking oak tree.
What do you need?
Some direction.
I thought we weren't killing the guys today.
I just feel like I'm not getting clear direction for this role.
Shut the fuck up, Noir, and everyone take your seats.
And this is just, it's the only joke for the whole season. They also have this really weird thing where Deep tells him the reason Noir loved killing so much was because it made him horny. So if he wants to channel his energy, he needs to let himself get turned on anytime he commits murder. The resolution to this is he kills someone and he gets a boner, and he and the Deep are like, bro. This is a real show that exists. By the way, is now a good time to talk about the show's obsession with making all the villain characters fucking freaks in the sheets? Because they do that with, like, every single one of them. Obviously, there's the Homelander drinking breast milk thing and his general mommy issues vibe that's been a thing since season 1. Like I said, they've amped that up to the point of cartoonish insanity the longer the show has gone on. Last season, he was drinking a bucket of milk straight from a cow. This season, they introduce a big-breasted right-wing nut job who's slavishly devoted to him, and so she's taken medication that allows her to produce breast milk even though she's not pregnant. It's, But Homelander isn't the only one. Like I said, Deep likes to fuck fish. This is, again, something that's been a thing since season 1.
I like you too. You know that. Let's not, rush into anything too fast. Okay. If I just touch it, will you shut up?
And in this season, they gave him an octopus girlfriend, played by Tilda Swinton. Yes, really. Ashley and the news reporter have just way too much to unpack. And don't even get me started on her dynamic with Tech Knight. We're not ready to get into that episode quite yet. All the main good guy characters have normal, vanilla sex lives, with the exception of Frenchie. But even then, his more out-there kinks are mainly linked to his time working for the bad guys. So it still kind of feels like only the villains are allowed to be sexually deviant.
He just gobbles that vagina right up. Nom, 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 nom.
It's like the people behind the show think the best way to signify that someone isn't right in the head is if they are even slightly kinky, and I'm not sure what they're trying to imply with that. And, alright, I've put it off long enough. I guess that was as good a segue as any to talk about it. There's an episode in season 4 where some really bad shit happens to Huey, and I'm gonna give the same forewarning I put in the disclaimer at the beginning of this video. We're about to touch on some pretty sensitive topics, so if that's not something you feel comfortable listening to, I advise you skip to this time code. Your mental health comes first. Okay, so A-Train informs the gang that Homelander is calling a bunch of soups together for a meeting and they want to know what it's about. It's taking place at a party being thrown by the billionaire Tech Knight, this show's parody of Batman. Look, he even has his own Alfred!
Is this guy supposed to be Alfred?
And they decide to have Huey go undercover as a superhero named Webweaver, who, as you can probably guess, is supposed to be the version of Spider-Man in this world. Apparently, Webweaver was invited to this party personally by Tech Knight to apply for the role of sidekick, and as Huey is about to find out, is being considered for that role because because he's a fucking freak. Tek Knight takes him down to his bat cave, and it turns out to be a BDSM sex dungeon. Trying to keep up appearances, Huey has to do all sorts of weird sex things that Web Weaver's apparently into, which involves him getting locked down and having his feet tickled by Ashley.
I'm gonna bite your dick off and cook it. I'm 100% a cannibal.
But eventually Tek Knight figures out who he really is, and then he decides to keep him strapped down with the intent of cutting new holes in him for him to fuck. But Huey is thankfully saved by his team before any incisions can be made. It is, of course, worth keeping in mind that he did still have to do a bunch of weird sexual stuff that he only consented to because he would have been killed otherwise. And even though he wasn't technically being threatened at the time because Tek Knight didn't know who he was, that's obviously going to exact a heavy toll on him mentally. Also, I wouldn't accept that as an argument anyway because Huey asked them to stop several times and Tek Knight refused because he didn't know the safe word. Like, Huey's literally saying, I want you to stop, and they're continuing anyway. And the messed up thing is, these scenes are played for comedy. Like, yes, at the end of the episode, Huey breaks down crying, and that seems to have been spurred on by what he just went through, but that's not what it's actually about. He's really broken up because his dad just died, and he's been trying to keep it together and pretend everything's fine, but then this caused him to just lose any of that composure. The scenes themselves where Huey is assaulted are meant to be comedic, like that clip I played for you earlier, despite the fact that Huey is going through something truly terrible. Something which, as I've touched on already, was actually handled with weight and severity when it happened to other characters in the past. Now, people are quick to play the whole male sexual assault isn't taken as seriously as it is with women card, and that is absolutely true, and something that needs to be discussed more broadly. People just don't take male victims of rape nearly as seriously, and will often downplay the trauma they experienced. But again, when it happened to the Deep in Season 1, that episode absolutely did not treat it like a joke. Sure, they never bothered to mention it again or use it for his development, which was a massive and frankly gross oversight on their parts, but at least in the moment they recognized how bad it was. So I don't necessarily know if it's due to any kind of social disparity between men and women. I think it literally is just that the writing in Season 1 was better than it is now. But I frankly don't understand how this could have happened because these seasons were made by the same exact people. You'd think if they understood then they would understand now, but I guess not. The creator of this show is Eric Kripke, who also created Supernatural, one of my favorite shows ever written. So even though I didn't think the show was very good, I still always had a lot of respect for the guy behind it. But that all changed with this episode, because right after it first came out, a lot of people recognized what I've already pointed out here and rightfully called the show out on it. And Kripke's response was to call it hilarious. He then went on to demonstrate how little he actually understands about Batman by using the same Reddit argument that's been debunked for years at this point. And it makes you question why he's at the helm of a show that's meant to satirize superheroes again. That's beside the point, so I won't harp on it too much, but it is really weird and worth pointing out. Eric, I don't think you were ever watching Batman the same way as the rest of the world if you think the Batcave even remotely resembles a sex dungeon. But if you still have your faith in humanity, hold your horses because there's more. This isn't something nearly as many people are talking about, but believe it or not, this was not the only instance of Huey being raped this season. It's just that this time it's a little more subtle, and as we've come to learn from things like The Acolyte or Wonder Woman 84, a lot of people don't even seem to notice stuff like this unless it's directly spelled out to them. In the next episode, the boys are trying to stop a plot to assassinate the president, and they eventually find out that the soup who's been hired to do the job is a shapeshifter. There's this really odd moment where they try to do that trope where the shifter gets lost in a crowd even though they just got finished showing us how long it takes for them to transform. Like, it has to rip off its own skin and it leaves a trail in the process, so surely there's only one person the shifter could possibly look like right now. This old lady that it had transformed into right before leaving the building. I don't know where she is in this crowd of people though, so either the show is telling me it somehow shifted again and didn't leave a pile of flesh in its wake, or it jetpacked into the sky before the heroes could get outside. This is a small moment, but I found it really funny, and it's what allowed the shifter to escape so that later in this episode it could capture Annie and take over her form. Now, the show goes out of its way to establish a few things about this shifter's powers. Whoever's form it takes, it can also absorb all their memories and perfectly copy their mannerisms.
Oh. Why the fuck would I kill your mother?
So when it impersonates Annie, it would be really hard for Huey to realize she's not the real deal. He does eventually figure it out, but not before fake Annie has sex with him and then proposes. And if you have even a decent grasp on the concept of consent, you've probably already gathered where I'm going with this. Because Huey did not know the person he was sleeping with wasn't really his girlfriend, he could not have meaningfully consented to having sex with her. Therefore, he was raped, how many times was it?
Had to be less than
20.
Jesus Christ. Not only does the show never actually acknowledge this fact or what it would do to Huey mentally, it actually takes it a step further and does something really heinous. Basically, Annie does eventually get free and somehow manages to get all the way to this highly secure bunker that's 4 stories below ground.
We wouldn't be stuck 4 stories underground playing pocket pool.
In order to stop the shapeshifter from killing the president and her friends. She kills the shapeshifter, the day is saved, and they all go home. But uh-oh, Huey's in trouble. Annie gets really mad at Huey for the fact that he slept with this imposter and that he proposed to her.
You put the ring on her finger, Huey. I know because I pried it off her fucking dead hand.
She accuses him of being shallow and not looking too close because the person pretending to be her was giving him everything he wanted without any of the emotional baggage. Even though I cannot stress enough that she had every single detail of Annie's physiology and memories locked down, and he still figured out it wasn't her. So not only is what Huey went through not even being acknowledged, but now he's being blamed for something that he couldn't possibly have done any differently. But the thing is, I can hear all of you right now screaming the same thing at me that I thought when I first saw this clip being shared around on Twitter, which is that obviously Annie just went through something extremely traumatic and harrowing, so of course she's gonna lash out irrationally at the person who's supposed to always be there for her and quite literally wasn't. Deep down, she obviously understands that it's not his fault, but she's upset, and she's taking it out on him unfairly. The problem is, I think you're giving the show a little too much credit, because while that's definitely true, what you would then expect is some sort of moment where she realizes she was being unfair and apologizes to Huey. Yes, she went through something really fucked up, but the amount of mental damage this would cause for Huey can't be overstated. He's gonna have intimacy and trust issues for the rest of his life because someone was able to so convincingly portray the person he loved for 10 whole days without him noticing. This is something that's gonna psychologically damage both of them for the rest of their lives, and all it would take is one scene where Annie acknowledges that it's not his fault and that she was too hard on him. But that never happens. The only follow-up this argument gets for the rest of the episode is this exchange.
You are getting tested for every single disease known to mankind, okay? I'm not getting shifter syphilis.
And then they're just buddy-buddy again. The way the show frames it is that Huey did indeed fuck up, even if unintentionally, but it's okay because Annie forgives him for it. It's just disgusting. Season 4 is so fucking bad. Like, they introduced this new villain called Sister Sage, whose only superpower is that she's apparently the smartest person in the world, so Homelander wants her advice on how to basically take it over. And I know the show wants me to believe she's really smart, but I always say that a smart character can only be as clever as the one writing them, and I don't understand a single one of her plans or why she's even doing this at all. She kind of has that Thrawn from Ahsoka effect where something will happen that you'd think she doesn't want, but then she just goes, oh, it's all part of my plan, don't worry about it. Only the difference is that her plans actually somehow work, and for the life of me, I can't figure out how. Like, throughout the whole season, Homelander wants to find out who the mole is, and she seems to figure out pretty quickly that it's A-Train. But for some reason, she doesn't go to Homelander with this information, and even throws a different guy under the bus. When it's eventually revealed to Homelander that it's A-Train, he accuses Sage of being stupid because she couldn't figure it out. But she said she did always know, and that she kept it a secret so that he would continue feeding the heroes bad information. Which is a really weird excuse considering all the info A-Train gives the boys is true. He told them that Homelander was gathering all the soups at Tech Night so they could discuss plans for world domination, and the boys acted on that intel to listen in and gain valuable information. A-Train was the one who told them about the assassin that was hired to kill the president and where to find them, and that's how they found out said assassin was a shapeshifter. If they hadn't known that, then Huey probably wouldn't have ever figured out that the person in the room with them and the president wasn't Annie, because the fact that they all knew that a shapeshifter was involved would have made it so that that information was on his mind, even if vaguely. I'm not sure what Sage and Homelander would have to gain by letting them know that, unless they wanted the assassination to fail, but frankly they're lucky it did, since the only reason the president survived was because Starlight happened to show up right at the last minute, and we already went over how that was extremely contrived. I really have no idea why Sage didn't tell Homelander who the mole was, but I guess it doesn't matter, because events she couldn't possibly have predicted or controlled caused Newman to be killed and President Singer to take the fall for it, making the Speaker of the House the next in line to be President pro tempore. I guess Sage somehow knew that his first act would be to deputize the Supes and put the country under martial law. It's all very nice and convenient when things just kind of happen like that. And when Homelander finally asks her why she decided to help him establish a racist ethno-state of Supes who would not be welcoming or kind to her, this is the only answer she gives.
Why would you do this?
to see if I could.
To give a little backstory, she explained in a previous episode that when she was a little girl, her grandmother died of leukemia. She had come up with a cure within like 3 days, but because she was a little black girl, all the doctors laughed her off and her grandma died. Because of this, she's decided that she doesn't care about anything or anyone, and that the world can burn for all she cares. She can come up with all sorts of things to fix the world's problems. She has the intellect for it, but she doesn't do it because of that one time when she was a kid and she couldn't save her grandma. The same grandma who, by the way, was a Black Panther. I'm sure she would love to see her granddaughter not using her intelligence for the good of mankind. Maybe that's something we could even explore. There's always next season. There's a lot more I could say about the show that I'm just gonna let lie for the sake of this video not being any longer than it already is, but there's one last thing I wanted to go over that I'd just be remiss if it got left out. And this is because the last person I want to talk about was, at one point, my favorite character on this show, and that is Huey Campbell. I already went over pretty much everything to do with him in season 4, the good and the monstrously bad, and I think my overall conclusion there is that he's actually handled fine there. Again, the stuff with A-Train is really good, and they also have a lot of great moments between him and his dad that I haven't really touched on yet. Season 4 handles Huey pretty well, but it doesn't matter because season 3 already completely assassinated him. This is actually the reason I gave up on the show after the 3rd season, because again, I really liked Huey, and seeing what he'd become filled me with so much rage. They took a character who was compassionate, caring, and understanding and turned him into an insecure man-child who's mad his girlfriend is stronger than him, and that just doesn't sit right with me. Okay, so to add a bit of context, this is what Huey does in season 3. He starts off at pretty much the happiest point of his life. He has a really nice, well-paying job working with someone he considers a really close friend to take down Soups and undermine Vought in a much more above-board way than he's used to. He and Annie are really happy together, they share a nice apartment. Things are looking up for old Huey. And then he finds out that Newman is not only a Soup, which she kept from him the entire year they were working together, but specifically the Soup who'd been behind the head explosions last season that significantly undermined the boys' efforts at multiple points, and could have easily killed Huey at one point, which caused him extreme panic at the time. And he finds out about this in the worst possible way by following her into an alley and witnessing her brutally murder someone with her powers. This is the first domino that leads toward a downward spiral where Huey feels powerless. Everything he thought he knew about Newman was a lie, all the work they'd been doing together was a lie, and it was ultimately for nothing. And on top of all that, his girlfriend is constantly putting her own life in danger by continuing to work at Vought, and there's not a single thing he can do to protect her if Homelander decides to go apeshit. All these things compound and make Huey decide he needs to level the playing field, so when Butcher reveals that he's gotten a hold of multiple vials of temporary V, which can give the user superpowers for a short period of time, Huey steals himself some and is given the power of teleportation, as well as enhanced strength, durability, and the power to heal his broken arm, which implies speed healing. Now, for some reason, when the other characters find out about this, they treat it as a bad thing, and I find that kind of weird. Because, yes, as we eventually find out toward the end of the season, Temp V is very bad for you, and if you take multiple doses like Butcher and Huey are doing, it is absolutely guaranteed to kill you over time. Which is how Butcher ends up with a brain tumor by the end of the season, which manifests itself into its own shitty plotline in season 4 that we're not even gonna get into. So yeah, Temp V is bad for you, but the characters don't know that at the time. MM is upset with Butcher about it because, as he puts it,
The whole point of what we do is that no one should have that kind of power.
If you don't draw the line somewhere, how the hell are you gonna know where you stand?
which is actually an interesting topic that I wish the characters on this show would discuss more, because it brings to light how they might have come into this soup fighting business for completely different reasons that could conflict with each other. That might be MM's position, but I could just as easily see someone like Huey or Annie arguing that it's not the power that makes them evil, it's the culture that created them. And in fact, the very existence of people like Annie or Kimiko are living proof that that kind of power in the right hands can be used for good, like, say, Huey and Butcher using it to go up against Homelander. Keep that in mind, we're gonna circle back to it in a moment. The reason Annie is against it initially just seems to be that the drug was untested at the time Huey first shot it up.
You shot up an untested drug from Vought. You could have gotten yourself killed.
Which is a fair reason, but, you know, once Huey used it and it worked and didn't seem to have any negative side effects, I think he could easily argue that it was ultimately worth the risk. He saved MM's life because of his superpowers, and like we just went over, them continuing to use the Temp V could ultimately end up being for the greater good.
I mean, who do you guys want? Do you guys want gawky, weak, freaking the fuck out Huey, or do you want strong, confident, handling his shit Huey? With it, I can actually help. Without it, I'm I'm probably dead.
No, yeah, he's right. Not only can he use his powers to save others, but they'd really come in handy for protecting himself on field missions, which he's gonna be a part of either way. Much better to have super durability while getting shot at and the power to relocate quickly, I think. So I think Huey and Butcher using the Temp V is fine, and I'm actually a bit put off by the show's insistence that it's not. What I take issue with is what Huey does next. So Butcher basically realizes Soldier Boy is the best possible chance they have of killing Homelander, since he's one of the strongest superheroes to ever live and has a handy-dandy new explosion power that can decimate city blocks. He knows MM would never go along with a team up with the guy who murdered his entire family, so he drugs him, and Huey and Butcher leave with Soldier Boy. And I'm not necessarily against the plan on its face, because between him and Homelander, Soldier Boy is easily the lesser of two evils, and at least with him, they know he can be sedated and properly imprisoned, since it's been done before. But where I draw the line is that Huey would never agree to Soldier Boy's terms. In exchange for killing Homelander, he wants them to help him find his old teammates so he can murder them, and I can see Butcher absolutely being fine with this plan, but Huey is not the kind of guy to just serve people up on a platter to be slaughtered. Especially Innocents, that Soldier Boy isn't even specifically targeting, but who will be caught up in the crossfire. I get that they're soups, and most of them are probably bad people, but all the same, Huey only kills people when he absolutely has to. He's also one of the boys who was willing to humor the idea that soups can actually be good people, even when MM and especially Butcher were skeptical initially. And yes, I already highlighted that Huey's at a desperate point of powerlessness, which is driving a lot of his decision making, but I don't think that necessarily accounts for something this extreme. All of this finally comes to a head in the episode Herogasm, where Huey and Annie get into a heated argument about all the decisions he's made recently, and this scene is where I lose all respect for this character. Now, like I hinted at a minute ago, part of what's made him feel so powerless as of late is the fact that Annie is in constant danger and he has no way of saving her. But this scene recontextualizes that concern in a way that's unbecoming, to say the least.
I saved you, Annie. Jesus Christ, all I want is to save you. God forbid I help you, because I always have to be the weak one. You always have to be the strong one. You always have to be so much stronger than me.
This was set up in previous episodes, but that doesn't even begin to justify this bizarre character shift. There's a couple of great little moments in season 1 where Huey and Annie are going on their first date, and Huey realizes Annie is intentionally bowling really badly so as not to show him up and make him feel emasculated.
I think you're holding back for some weird, not gonna show me up on a first date reason. You wanna quit stroking my ego and show me what you really got?
She talks about a boy she liked in high school who was being picked on, and so she stepped in and saved him, and he felt really humiliated, so he never spoke to her again. The lesson she learned from that was that she should never show her strength to a boy she likes, but Huey breaking down that barrier instantly makes her feel more comfortable with him.
Does it bother you that I could whip your ass in bowling? And in everything?
I really think it's awesome. They're really you.
It makes her see him as different from a lot of other guys she's been with, and it's one of the reasons she continues going out with him. This scene in season 3 actually acknowledges these moments, and this is what it has to say about them.
On our first date, you said that it didn't bother you.
I know, but it does. Sometimes. A little.
Oh, you can fuck right off with that. This retcons those scenes to mean that their relationship is built on a pretty big lie. Well, I mean, it already was because of the whole, I'm secretly working with a group of terrorists out to destroy the company you work for and I'm not telling you part. But this is different because that was meant to be a genuine moment that built up the love these two characters share with each other. The man that Annie knows Huey to be, despite the lies he told her, is what makes her realize he's a good person, and it's why she gives him a second chance in the end. But apparently that was false too, and it's all in service to taking what could have been an actually compelling motive for Huey and turning it into, he feels insecure because a girl can beat him up. Are we in first grade? It just feels like they wanted to give Huey and Annie relationship drama and couldn't be bothered to come up with any actual reason why they might be at odds. So they decided to pretend the Temp V was bad without ever justifying that claim at the time it was made and retcon one of the better moments of this god-awful show, thus taking away a piece of what made Huey such a good character in the first season. Fuck the boys, it can fucking rot for all I care. I'm ending this video here. But before I go, I'm gonna do the obvious thing that everybody does and say that if the main appeal of the Boys for you is that it's a more violent and bloody depiction of a superhero world that's not afraid to touch on certain adult topics, Invincible is a much better show. You've probably already seen it if you're watching this, but if not, give it a watch. I highly recommend. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I have no idea how to end this video. I did not write an outro, so I'm just gonna kind of ramble indecisively until eventually Editing Sheev cuts off this